forecast what that might be in December or January, but we felt that 3% was reasonable based on the impact that has on the budget projections that we discussed earlier. Section 12 highlights all of those areas where we're doing something slightly different than 3%, of the reasons why that is. And the other comment that we'll no doubt touch on and debate in the discussion moving forward is around the parking charges. And that was some discussion in the earlier paper around increasing parking charges or decreasing parking charges or increasing charges as a means of generating income. And really just to remind members that the legislation around parking charges doesn't allow us to do that. So if we increase parking charges, it has to be in relation to a transport related impact. So one council explicitly said they were raising the charges to cover part of their deficit, and were challenged in the courts for that reason, quite rightly so, because that does contravene the regulations around parking charges.
Thank you, Mr. Mason. So we'll take the main bulk of the paper first. So going from page 75 to 82. Does anybody have any questions on that part of the paper, please? Councillor Lumby.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, the lawyer point on page 73, it refers to the Cabinet meeting being on the 21st of November. So unless it's being held in secret on a Sunday, I think it means 23rd of November. That's why I'm a lawyer. Getting on to more important points, page 80, garages. If we have effectively a two-tier market with a lot of voids in garages outside central Winchester, on the one hand, and then very high demand for garages in central Winchester, why are we not reducing the charges for those outside central Winchester to encourage take up, and why are we not looking at a higher increase in central Winchester? That's my first question. In fact, only question on the main body of the paper can be part of the charge there.
Chair, we have identified, our performance has shown an increase in voids in garages, particularly in our rural areas. At the same time, our programme around the promotion of the availability of those garages, I think, can be improved. So that's we want to make sure before we immediately start reducing the cost, although part of that programme for promoting them could be whether or not a discount should be applied in some circumstances. So what we have endeavoured to do is complete a fundamental review of our garage letting process. We have some concern around an increase in price for those in low demand areas would almost certainly result in an increase in terminations, because people only have to give a week's notice to terminate a garage, and we always get terminations every year anyway. So we want to avoid an increase in those where we've identified a potential issue, but rather than do a knee-jerk reaction to that by reducing costs, we felt that reviewing options for better promoting availability should be prioritised. Equally, I think demand remains very high in the centre, so the prices there do remain very low compared to a private garage being off the let, and compared to city centre parking charges as well. So a number of people do rent for that purpose, and so that's why we determined that inflation increasing city centre, no increase outside, but review the both. And I think whether or not we've got those charges right will be part of that process. The initial review we've done would suggest that our charges in both areas are broadly in line with other Hampshire districts or other registered providers in Hampshire. So there isn't anything that immediately stands out as being a problem there, but I think it is something we want to do more work on.
Thank you, Mr. Mason. Any other? Councillor Becker.
Sorry, another few questions on garages. My first question though relates to the Guildhall. What stage are discussions at with Majesty's Court Service at the moment?
Those discussions are ongoing. Our corporate head of estates is in direct discussions currently. He doesn't anticipate a decision in relation to that until early in the new year, which is the time when the court's budgets tend to be confirmed.
Sorry, in relation to the garages, I was just wondering if there is provision for electricity in those garages. Where you have a number of people wanting to get electric cars who don't have their own off-street parking, and it could be a way for them to invest in an electric car that they wouldn't otherwise be able to charge. Is that something that's ever been considered?
Not that specific issue directly. Most garage sites would have a nearby supplier. We've had a number of issues around lighting of garage areas, obviously for where we've had cases of antisocial behaviour. So what the individual garages, none of the individual garages have a power supply, but it would mean it's an adaptation or an improvement to achieve that.
Thank you. I wanted to ask on section 12(1)(e), the lifeline charges. We've stated in that paragraph that for the wider public, our charges are already higher than some competitors, so no increase. Is that something we should consider reviewing and putting in line with our competitors?
Certainly consider reviewing the future of that service. I think is important. We do feel that we have a strong selling point for people who want to use that service, in that we have a direct link with a southern call centre operator. So some of the cheaper services offer national call centres, which have proved difficult in some of the quality of service there. And in saying that, bring in line with some of our competitors, some charities offer it for free. So we couldn't offer it for free under our current arrangements. So certainly that's one area where we seek to ensure we're recovering our costs, so we don't have to offer that service at all. I think it's to the benefit of our community that we do. So that's we're keen to keep it reasonably competitive.
Any other questions on Councillor Hall?
Thank you, Chair. We made reference in a couple of places to obtaining data about other services in other places. Do we, as a matter of also for the fees and charges outside of those which obviously are given to us to charge formally, look at how we compare? Because for some things we see more expensive, for some perhaps not as expensive. So are we doing due diligence on the fees and charges paper to get that benchmark on an annual or periodic basis to allow that comparison to be made? Thank you.
Chair, yes, all our corporate heads were charged with analysing the market effectively, just to ensure that charges were broadly in line. I think we have a number of charges which are based on an assessment of our operating costs, and we have others that are based on assessment of the sort of near neighbours and what general charges are around. So it is very much every charge would be on a case by case basis. Obviously, there would be too much of that information to put in this paper, but just to reassure members, all corporate heads were charged with analysing the market conditions, and if they were out of kilter, bringing forward either proposals or analysis as to why our charges are acceptable.
Thank you. Councillor Cromwell.
Thank you, Chair. Could you just enlighten me on how much revenue we bring in through the garages that we rent out? And with respect to the huge demand in the city centre, the city area, for those garages, what difference would it make if we actually increased the prices even more than 3%? Let's say 5%. Would it make a material difference, or is it peanuts?
Chair, I'm not as close to these figures as I used to be. You still live and breathe garage charges. It was so important to the HRA income investment. But it is a substantial. It's hundreds of thousands of pounds we generate through garage income. So yeah, an above inflation increase is material. Yeah, I think that's the point you're asking. So what we do need to be cautious of course, is that above inflation, as I said earlier, the above inflation increases in the past have had the impact of seeing a lot of terminations. We've generally recovered from that, and our stock is, I think we currently have a void level of just above 10%, which is much higher than our target. But most of those are in those outlying areas, not in the city centre.
I can just ask, yeah, so really that was my focus, was on the place where the demand is highest. If there's a lot of demand and a waiting list, then why not? Is there a good reason why not to? Because presumably, if someone was to leave, you could replace them.
And that's really just a judgment for Cabinet to make. Certainly, it could sustain a higher charge. I'm sure it could, but we would want to do some analysis as to what that charge should be set at. Should it be at commercial rate? Should it be at something to reflect the value of linked to parking or whatever? So is the basis of the charge. I think we need to consider. We have always maintained a garage stock though, as a means of assisting with parking on our housing estate. So broadly, the garages were traditionally housing garages, and they reflect the fact that most of our housing, very few of our housing has driveways or parking facilities. So that the original provision was for that. So significant increases in city, whether it's city centre or not, we would have people that would struggle and would be moving away from the purpose of providing them in the first place. But that's all part. That needs to be part of that review as to what do we want to achieve from our garage stuff.
Councillor Ferguson.
Thank you, Chair. I won't dwell on the garages, Mr. Botham, but just because in my ward we have a lot of garages which might be considered city centre garages, but for residents who are perhaps sole traders or who need a van for their work, we might want to have some unintended consequences increasing those charges, so we just need to take that into account. My question was on the increase in parking undiscounted residential permit charges. First of all, I wondered what proportion of our residential permits were discounted, and also we are sometimes challenged by residents saying we're very keen to sell permits, but then there is nowhere to park. And if we're increasing the fees, are we, I don't know, are we somehow then making a promise that they'll be able to find somewhere to park, but there is nowhere, particularly again in our most densely urban areas?
As the report refers, the increase in that charge is a commitment that we've signed up to as part of the HSE agreement with Hampshire. So Hampshire have set a charge across the county and have required anyone who undertakes the agency on their behalf to achieve that charge by April next year. So that's the reason why that increase is reconfirmed through this budget. It's a decision taken 2 years ago. To phase towards £50. So it's the second part of that increase. There is never the permits are sold on basis that there is no guarantee of space. We have a number of controls in Winchester to control the numbers of people who can access those permits, and that's the measures that we take. But as we say, that doesn't confirm that space on any one day. That would be quite difficult to do with the visitor permits that are also offered through that scheme as well.
Any other questions on the main body of the paper? Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just question 13.3, where there is a commitment for detailed proposals in the new year on a surcharge on polluting cars inside the air quality management area. But as we know, our current road network in the city does not help people to avoid the city, as we see great juggernauts trundling along St George's Street and the like as a matter of course. So can I just question the commitment to do this, which I understand why it's here, but what else sits alongside that in terms of enabling those who perhaps have other more polluting vehicles to avoid this particular area? Thank you.
Councillor Todd?
Yeah, we're as a district, we're not in a position to have an air quality surcharge of the kind that they have in London. So what we're proposing is that if you drive into the centre and park, you will pay more for your parking. It's possible to approach Winchester from almost every direction without driving through it in order to park. And so it doesn't apply in the way that it wouldn't apply in the way that you're concerned. I know that the county, I was briefing on the LTP4, the Local Transport Plan 4, is looking at wider measures in the longer term as to how it manages air pollution across the county, which might include air quality charging zones where you pay for entering the zone in a vehicle, but as a parking authority, as a district, we're not able to do that. So the only discussion at the moment is for charging if you drive in, park in a more polluting vehicle in the centre, and that is the lever that we're able to pull, or we want to investigate pulling to see what's practical and sensible and consistent with the movement strategy and the other priorities we have.
Councillor Cook?
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to bring attention to page 81, parking charges, 13.1, and I don't need to read the whole paragraph, but there is a comment there. It says the charges will take effect from October 2022 rather than April 2022. Whenever I look through the document here, I see April 22 all the time. But why is it in this particular one you're making it October 2022? What's the recommendation behind that? Have I missed something this evening?
It's
Thank you.
mainly because the last parking charge increase was implemented in October rather than April. So it was only implemented in October this year, and so we'll take it forward to October next year.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
There's a second thing as well, which is if we are introducing, if we the result of consultation and preparatory work and investment, all that kind of stuff says that we will be doing air quality based charging in the centre. It will take time to implement, so we wouldn't be able to do it in April.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, moving on to Appendix 1. Starting on page 83, does anybody have any questions on Appendix 1? It's a big appendix, noted. Councillor Cress. Sorry?
We're going page by page, or are you happy
Just to take footings on Appendix 1, yeah.
Thanks. I'll go to page 110, if I may. Just interested in sports pitches and fees. Just looking at equity and charging. Just looking at football pitches compared to rugby pitches, compared to American football, which is price per match. Football and rugby pitches price per match as well, and they seem quite different in charges. So just wondering why they are so very different. And I've got a couple more, but I'll go one by one.
Who'd like to address that one? Mr. Basie?
Chair, I don't have a specific answer on the detailed fee. What I would say is that this is one area where we referred earlier to the benchmarking of charges elsewhere. We haven't increased sports pitch fees for some time, so I know the team has completed a detailed exercise to compare with other districts and neighbourhood authorities, and on the basis of considering an above inflation increase on sports, that couldn't be justified through that benchmarking exercise. Our charges are broadly similar to neighbouring districts, and so it's felt actually an inflation increase rather than an above inflation increase should be recommended as part of that. As regards the difference between football and rugby, I would need to defer to our environment team and confirm that outside of the meeting.
Thank you. Councillor Cross?
Yeah, thank you. So thanks for the answer. I think it does bear a broader review of sports pitches fees because of that difference, just so we get equality of access to people who are interested in playing sports. Rugby seems like a very good deal right now, as does cricket. But perhaps for more popular sports, maybe football and tennis. Seems if I was interested in playing cricket, I could play cricket for £1.90 for a day, but my daughter would have to pay £3.35 for maybe half an hour, an hour and a quarter for tennis. It just seems interesting to get more people involved in sport, just to take a look at that policy.
Was that a question? It felt like a sort of statement.
Is that something that could be considered?
Shall I assist, Chairman? I believe there is some differentiation due to the work that needs to be undertaken to the different pitches to prepare them for use. So that's why the fee may be higher in some places for the green pitches, let's call them that. But certainly for Cabinet, we can ask for an update to be given to Cabinet to explain why there's a particular differentiation, which will be in part, of course, due to market rates in addition to the work that needs to be done for the pitches to be prepared for use throughout the season.
Did you have any more, Councillor Pratt? Anybody else have any more questions? Councillor Lumbey?
Thank you, Chair. I've got three, I think, so I can do them all together or one at a time. Yeah, all together, okay. First of all, Park Homes annual fees have gone up 3%. I think it represents a lot of park homes. What do people get for these charges? These seem like a rather unfair charge. Do people who live in park homes pay council tax? I think they do. What is this charge in addition? Why is it being increased? That's question one. Question two is then one of actually. So can you jump on page 7? It starts on page 99 and it goes on for all the way down to page 100 as well. Okay. And then the second question is actually on page 101, which is actually one that Councillor Power mentioned earlier on, which is that we have these fixed penalty notices for doing terrible things, littering, dog fouling, blight posting, blight, breach of the community protection notice. Why are these things not increasing? I think there was a reference somewhere else about these being fixed elsewhere, in which case this fee is in the wrong place. But surely we should be showing we're tough on this frankly offensive behaviour. And then we sort of covered garages on page 105. But didn't you say that Central Winston would be increased with inflation? Because this doesn't seem to have any increase at all. You show page 105. That's my three questions.
Councillor.
In terms of the park homes,
This is for the site owners' fees. Now, site owners, park own, it's the cost of licensing fundamentally. It's the cost of inspection of those sites to make sure they're being managed correctly. And, I'd be very much in favour that that is done properly. So we need to recover our costs on it. As a supplementary to that, Councillor Lumby, park homeowners pay council tax band A across the piece, as far as I understand. So I can answer that particular part of it. The next part I'll hand over to Mr. Botham.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, that's exactly the case. It's a charge to the owners. It's to cover the cost of our private sector housing team and licensing those sites. That's the thing that relates to. I think I would agree with your comment on the fixed penalty notices. That is something I did challenge the team on, and have clarified that those are nationally set charges and not within our jurisdiction. They technically should be on in the other appendix. I think so. That's something we'll look at amending the paper to reflect that. And I'm grateful for you picking up what looks like an error on the garage charges, because the proposal is to increase city centre garages, or was to increase city centre garages by 3%, but not the rest. So that's an error there.
Thank you, Chair. A supplemental on park homes. Understand recovery of costs. Do we make a profit? Do we make a loss? Does this charge more than cover the cost, or not? How does it say? Appreciate you may want to go.
Yeah, I would need to check the detail behind the regulations there, but it appears to me one that we would seek to recover costs, not to limit it.
Any further questions? Councillor Brown.
Thank you. My question relates to page 111, special events, 13.3. I just wanted to know what sort of commercial events this was intending to cover. Is this the sort of large-scale festival that takes place at River Park? And if so, how does that interact with the cricket pitch fees? How do those sorts of fees fit together?
That's my understanding. Is yes, that's what those charges relate to. So if we do pre-COVID, we had a number of events on that sort of land, and where it was a commercial operator, that's the fees that we set for those events. It doesn't relate obviously to the sports pitch charge. One comment on the sports pitch charges that I didn't cover earlier on is that is an area where we substantially under recover our cost of operation. So to cover the cost of operating sports pitch, which would deter any involvement in sport at all, and so that the council has for many years cross-subsidised that, as do most of them.
Yeah, we've had those discussions with the Susans. In relation to the large events, it just says on application. Do we have any idea what sort of fees we're recovering? Are the fees comparable to other councils? What sort of numbers are you talking there?
Chair, I would need to check with the team for detail.
Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Chair. I'm looking at page 91, 92 about cemetery fees, and new graves dug for the city wards, but then residents within the remaining district are paying twice the amount. But in many of our wards, they don't actually have their own burial facilities. They don't have a choice to go elsewhere. And this is obviously historic sort of construct here, but it seems hugely unfair that a few miles up the road, if I take South Eastern, they don't have a cemetery, so they don't have the same choice in terms of provision as to the huge differential within wards of very close proximity. Question as to is that something that has been a structure that's been agreed for a period, and we're continuing with that. Just seems quite discriminatory at this point. I also had a question which Councillor Lumbie has partially addressed, but I know residents feel fly tipping is hugely aggravating, a terrible, terrible blight on many of our wards, and £400 just doesn't seem enough of a deterrent for what people are doing and leaving on the roadside. So if, as Mr. Botham says, this is in the statutory section, but if there's any discrimination, if there's any ability for us to make some choices here, I can say that residents would support you wholeheartedly in fly tipping charges being increased, because they find it hugely annoying. Chair, I wonder if those 2 points of clarification could be covered, please. Thank you.
Councillor Cutler.
On the cemetery charges, I think it is a historical point, but I do recall when we froze them last year, there was some discussion that some of the parishes were finding a problem that Winchester was cheaper than they were, and people were going to Winchester even with those additional costs. So I think it's something we need to investigate further, and your point about some parishes not having burial facilities, I think it is a good one. So yeah, I'd be keen to look into that further. In terms of the fly tipping, this is the spot fine if you don't prosecute, and it is very much a matter of discretion, I suppose. But in a lot of cases, the on-the-spot fine tends to is often levied on people who have paid to have waste taken away and not realise it's happened, and they pay up very, very quickly at not having the publicity, where sometimes the prosecutions can be quite expensive and long-winded process. So a quick win on a fine like that, I think, still is worth having. And if we could do more of them, actually, it would be great. But obviously the prosecutions for major and disruptive fly tipping. I mean, I remember a case in Southwark and Wickham where it was a black bin line full of rubbish, and the neighbourhood services found an address in it, went to the person who had paid someone to take it away, and they paid up immediately out of sheer embarrassment. Now, they're not the sort of people who want to take to court anyway, so I think it's quite a reasonable level for that. But so, yeah.
Councillor Ferguson.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Horror has already asked a question on fly tipping penalty. I just had a quick question on page 105, 9.3, guest room hire in our shelter schemes. I noticed in the report it said that the fee for renting out a room for guests had to be increased because the current fee wasn't covering cleaning charges. I just wondered if any testing had been done with our older residents as to whether that would mean they do or do not get visitors. So my concern would be that it looks like a reasonable increase to us, but if it meant some of our older residents didn't actually have anyone come to stay, then it's not a reasonable increase. Thank you.
We clearly do have regular discussions with the residents in our schemes. So whether or not those discussions don't reach everybody. So I suppose, yeah, whether or not it would have the impact that you suggested, I can't respond to that directly. What I can say is that a very low charge that we've had for our schemes has meant that some people have been exploiting that. So you see a very small number of people that stay for a long time which in many cases is not a problem because our guest rooms are not well used. We have invested in improving them, so they are much better quality now, much better quality offer, and getting the cleaning right is important. So we are not seeking to recover our costs. Whether that's going to have a longer term impact, I think it still represents extremely good value accommodation for anyone coming to the area.
If I may, Chair, I suppose my question is, can we ask the question? Can we at least investigate, because it's an assumption that we're making? I mean, if you...
Sorry, Chair. Yeah, I mean, I can certainly arrange for that, and I just felt I couldn't respond to that question myself. But...
Thank you, Councillor Ferguson. A really good point. Councillor Lumby.
Thank you, Chair. The question prompted by page 97, temporary road closures. However, I may be looking at the wrong part and would appreciate guidance. Next year is the Queen's Platinum Jubilee, assuming she makes it to then, and we know she's immortal, so she will. So next year we will be having a weekend of celebration, extra bank holidays, and a lot of people will be having street parties, and will be road closures to allow people to come out, the doilies and the sandwiches, preferably with the crust cut off, and all that good stuff. Firstly, are each of the people who are looking to do that going to have to pay £1,751 to have a temporary closure to have a party, or is it somewhere else? But more importantly, should we be making a specific exception here anyway for the Platinum Jubilee, which is an incredible event that celebrates a, frankly, lifetime of service. And as an ancillary and frankly unrelated to licence fees question, should we be putting together a pack now which can be issued to parishes so they know what the procedure is to get a road closure, so these parties can be organised sooner rather than later, and we don't have a mad rush at the end? Thank you.
You're all about the party. Councillor Cutler, over to you.
I do recall quite a bit of discussion about this in the past, and we have a problem with, I think those fees are set by Hampshire County Council up to a point, and at one point we didn't charge at all. But we did take a decision that this should mainly be for commercial purposes, and that for charitable events the fee would be waived. But I don't know if we've formalised that yet, so I think that's legitimate. Give a better explanation than me.
Thank you. If I can help members, first of all, we have already raised the matter of preparing for the Platinum Jubilee with the parishes. We did that at the last parish liaison. There's another parish liaison next week, and we'll be reminding them again. I'm sure, as members recall, this is an amazing celebration of the work delivered by our Queen, but she has had other jubilees before this one, and there's always a pack, and councils are always encouraged to ensure that residents can celebrate these events in the easiest way possible, and that usually involves a conversation where we do have to assess the street. If you can imagine, if it's a cul-de-sac, it's quite simple to put a sign at the end of the road, and that can be easily fixed. So we don't charge £1,000 for a road closure for street parties, but we await the government edict on how to manage that effectively. So we're keeping parishes up to date. Yeah.
So next I've got Councillor Cook.
Mine's not a question as of such. It's a typo error on page 111 regarding the special events. I think you'll find that it's medium says 500 to then 100. We should say 1,000. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Crest, then Councillor Booth.
Thank you, Chair. Just on page 98, just interested in market stalls and the fact they're not increasing. The notes refer to above average inflation increase last year. Hence the reason why they are why there's an increase this year. Just interested in how those prices benchmark to other markets, comments, observations on how successful the markets have been, as to whether they can sustain further increase, and thoughts on how they compare to independent shops in Winchester who might be seeing their prices increasing, how we can explain the difference. To help with those questions would be useful. Thank you.
Mr. Botham, over to you.
That charge has only, whilst it was at an above inflation increase agreed as part of the last year's paper, has only actually been implemented more recently, obviously because the market didn't operate for a large part of the year. So when it reinstated with the new charge. It is not felt that an increase in that could be supported. My understanding is that's based on benchmarking and elsewhere. The latter comment, the impact that has on other traders, obviously that's something that we do need to consider as a council. We do get representations from from the competition that holds, and clearly someone operating a shop with selling similar products pays more cost, but that's the nature of having a market in the town. But that's as much as I'm able to say here. What I can say is that it is something that the team are working on currently around what the impact that is having as we speak, and you need to understand that picture more clearly as the question is.
I'm going to go Councillor Ferguson, then Councillor Cook, and I'm going to try and move on to the next part because I'm aware it's now 10:15.
Thank you, Chair. I will be brief. I just want to come back to the temporary road closure fee of £1,700. I know we've already talked about it not being charged for charitable events, but I recall there was a problem last year where we had a market town who wanted to put on an event to do with apple bobbing or something, and at that event they wanted to have 1 or 2 catering stalls, and they were presented with this fee. Last year was a workaround for this, and we were told at that point that it would be looked at more carefully when this paper came round again. I don't see that workaround here. I just wondered what happened to that problem, because that problem hasn't gone away.
If Alresford is the market town referred to,
Can you put your microphone on if you're speaking to
I
me?
beg your pardon, Chair. If Alresford is the market town referred to, it was the Apple Festival, including Mr. Applehead, and it was held in the churchyard, and we have found a solution. Thank you very much.
Thanks for power. It wasn't the one I was talking about. It was an event in Bishop's Waltham, but again, it's the fact that we were told this would be looked at. I don't see it as huge.
I think we have to take that away, Chairman. I do remember that. This is clearly just the list of fees and charges, and there is an interpretation behind them. We'd need to check it, Councillor Ferguson. But the definition is commercial, so it depends where on the line the event stands.
Could we put that in the minutes if we're able? Thank you.
Together with the Queen's celebration. Councillor Cook.
Thank you, Chair. And back to the market stalls, page 98. I know that's a daily rate that we're referring to. I would perhaps just like to ask how that money's collected, if I may, please, from the market traders. I know how it's been collected in the past, but I'd like to know how it's now collected or how it's proposed to be collected from the market traders on a daily basis. I know how other market operators do it, but I don't think we do.
Chair, that's detail I'm going to check with our estate team and I can let them know.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, moving on to Appendix 2. Does anybody have any questions on Appendix 2, please? Far shorter than Appendix 1, just 2 short pages. No. Appendix 3 then, statutory fees not set by the council. Do we have any questions on those? They're all statutory, so there's very... No. Okay, wonderful. So we were requested to comment on this paper. We've made lots of comments. There's a few things coming to us in the minutes. The points I've taken away from this is that there will be the promotion of the garage and that reductions might be a consideration. I made a note to remedy the error in Appendix 1. And can we look into whether the uplift in the first light visiting charges means some people will no longer get visitors? So that's the primary points I had taken away from this one. So we shall, Councillor Powell.
Chairman, going back to my problem with defending the council house increase, rent increase in the co-op, I would prefer that the uplift was 3.1% to show parity. Is that clear? We're putting up social house rents by 3.1%. Would it not be prudent to put up all our fees and charges by 3.1% to?
I think you'll find not a huge variation in that because they've been rounded one way or another. And I think going through the whole thing and adding a few pence in most cases would probably not be okay. But
Thank you, Councillor Cutler. Does anyone have any debate on this? No. Fabulous. Now, at 10 to 10, we're going to move on to item 9, which is the finance and performance monitoring, including verbal updates, so we can all see the update that we've got on our agendas. So coming to you, Councillor Horrell, for the update, please.
Chair, thank you. Conscious of the time, all members here and indeed all councillors have received the Q2 Finance and Performance Monitoring Report. The minutes of our meeting held last Monday have been published. Members of the committee will know that you brought this meeting forward, so we were slightly out of sync. So we were only able to give those to you towards the end of last week, but I thank officers for doing that so quickly to ensure that the information was shared with everyone for this evening. My thanks go to councillors who asked questions and to officers who provided answers to date. That paper is circulated to all of you, and in agreement with officers, we have concluded that we will update that paper further and provide the latest version to you by the end of November, which should enable all questions that were posed before the meeting that weren't able to be answered to be completed, and any additional questions that were asked in last Monday's panel meeting to also be provided. That way, Chair, everyone will have the complete set of the conversation, just as you have from our previous meeting, the minutes which were circulated to you with the papers for this meeting. As you know, the Q2 report covered all the finance and performance criteria, plus also obviously the major projects that were reviewed. So, Chair, I think this is well documented. All the information is here, but obviously it is the prerogative of this committee to ask any further questions on the papers that have been provided. But I hope you feel that the panel have made a thorough job of actually analysing this on your behalf and providing a robust report to you about the issues that were raised. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, councillor Horrell. Did anybody have any questions on that or anything else they'd like to add? Or really good pages of notes, so thank you to councillor Horrell and the panel. No? Okay, so are we happy that we note those? Noted. Lovely, thank you. So coming on to item 10, the work programme. So we have one addition to the work programme that I briefly alluded to at the start, which is for the February 2022 meeting, to include a report back on the mental health work request. So you'll recall that this has been ongoing and rumbling away. I'm going to pass over to Ms Taylor to give us a brief update on what the plan is for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, indeed. Councillor Becker queried the status of this at the last meeting, and I undertook to speak to the lead director, who is Lisa Kirkman, who isn't with us this evening. And I've discussed with Lisa that, as the committee had indicated, through consideration of the work programme request, we will hold a series of small sessions with a small group of members to explore different aspects of how the council supports mental health. I believe members are interested in how we support our staff in maintaining a healthy work-life balance, how we support our tenants in particular as a particular group that we have additional responsibility for as corporate landlord, and indeed how we support the community at large. So Lisa and I discussed that we thought it would be helpful to have a small group session with the relevant lead operational officer for each of those areas, and then bring that back much in the form that we do with the performance panel papers for this committee to consider as a whole. And I did promise that, Councillor Becker, for February, and we're very happy to bring it back for February. But you have a really busy February meeting, I'm noting now, because you've got lots of budget on there. So I'm very happy to proceed with the work. And Councillor Brooke, you were just going to confirm the members that were going to sit on those groups for us over the next few months. But we're happy to bring it back in February if you have time, or of course to bring it back in March. But we're very happy to get on with the work. Maybe March is fine.
Could we ask our group leaders to make sure that we have nominations for that? I suggest a panel of 5 people, 2 from ours, 3 from yours. So if we could ask our group leaders to make sure that nominations come through. Would you like to come via me or directly to Mrs. Kirkman?
Oh, direct to Mrs. Kirkman would be absolutely fine. That's fine.
Thank you. So other than that, are we happy to note the work programme? Agreed. Are we happy to note the latest forward plan key decisions, item number 11, pages 233 to 238? Agreed. Noted. Wonderful. With that, we've made it just before 10 o'clock. Thank you, everybody, for your engagement this evening. I wish you a safe journey home.